Good evening, and welcome to our discussion with the North Guadalupe Working Group. We're excited that you can be here this evening, and I'm sure some of you have been following along on some of our community design workshops and have been wondering when we're getting back to hosting working groups. And we're very excited that you're here tonight for that. Several of you had the chance to see how to connect to the interpretation in the background. I would encourage you to take a look at the bottom of the screen and click on either live transcript if you would like closed captioning, or interpretation if you need interpretation in Spanish. I'd also invite my colleague Jamila Mavrakis to cover that in Spanish for those of us in the audience who are Spanish speakers.
Hola a todos. Si participa en español, debería estar escuchando traducciones al español en vivo en este momento. O si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, haga clic en el botón Interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccione la opción en español. Para participar en la sesión de grupo en español, por favor agregue las letras ESP en la parte delantera de su nombre en Zoom.
Thanks. So this evening, there's going to be several of us here in the background who are working on this project, and I wanted to make sure to introduce some of those people. So my name is Lonnie Stern. I'm with the Austin Transit Partnership. In addition, you may see some other familiar faces such as Peter Moen, Vikram Sinha, Jim Adams from McCann Adams, Isis Hernandez from AECOM, Jerry Smiley, also from AECOM, although temporarily also Isis, and Meg Merritt, who's from Movitas. There's a bunch of us also in the background that you'll get to meet tonight. We're going to be conducting this presentation in two parts. And so just to kind of set expectations, right now we're in a lockdown mode. We're going to be presenting some information to you, and then we're going to open up the mics so that way people can speak freely when recognized. We're going to ask you to use chat. You can also raise your hand to be recognized during that portion of the meeting. In the meantime, you can always put questions into the Q&A, and we'll be working on those in the background and even can provide answers for that. The chat, not so much. We're going to ask you to move things over to Q&A. But once we're in our discussion period, you could start using the chat. Another thing to keep in mind, we really want to make sure that we hear from all voices in our community. I know that for some of you, you may have already been talking about 29th Street, or you've come to a drag community event. But if there are some new faces out there, we're going to try to lean on those new voices. So if this may be your very first meeting, and if so, we would encourage you to speak up and be recognized and let us know what you think this evening. Now, can we slide forward and take a look at what's next? So first, working groups. What is a working group? How does that differ from a community design workshop? Well, working groups are more specific to your geographic location. I mean, all of us care about many different parts of the city, but if you live in one part of the city, you're going to know better than anyone else about access issues you might have there, or impacts to businesses, or left turns, or what about my bicycle? And we want to make sure that we really hear from people in their neighborhood. It's also a sounding board, and we intend to have more of these working group meetings, not just in the planning phase, but also during construction and eventually to ribbon cutting. Next slide. So for tonight's format, we've talked about this now. We will be turning on cameras later in the evening, and we will also be opening mics if needed. And we're going to be covering this in two parts. So we'll have a deeper dive for 29th Street and the Guadalupe intersection. And we'll talk about things like the design updates between 15% and 30% that are coming later this summer. We will discuss the tunnel considerations in this area, and then we'll open it up for a group discussion. Then we'll stop there. We'll put a pin in it. so that way we can move further up the corridor and make sure to talk about the section going up to 38th Street, since we haven't really had a lot of public conversations about that at this point. We'll go through the design walkthrough there and then open for a group discussion, and then we'll talk about next steps and move to adjourn. Let's see, I think with that covered, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague and friend Vikram Sinha to walk us through Project Connect.
Thanks, Lonnie. Hi, I'm Vikram Sinha, Public Involvement Manager for the Orange Line. Just wanted to talk to you all about introducing you to Project Connect and what we're looking to solve here. So this slide here kind of explains the need for transit in Austin. Over the next 20 years, we're going to see a doubling of the population in Austin. Very popular city, a lot of people hearing about it, a lot of people moving in. What does that mean for us here today? Well, all these folks cannot get into a car, so we're looking to address some of that growth by having people make smarter choices. If we can get them into light rail or a different mode, that's what we're hoping to accomplish. Will everybody get out of their car? No, but we're hoping to get a good number of folks to make smarter choices that are friendlier to the environment. Next slide, thank you. So Austin Strategic Mobility Plan. What this shows here is kind of the goals, that is to keep the number of cars constant while growing our population by an additional 2 million people. You'll see that as we go through these design drawings, this is where the policy rubber really meets the road, and why we are designing to a variety of modes to address that growth, but also to make sure that all modes are respected and we're really getting a good balance going. Next slide, please. So Project Connect program components, some of the big things that we've got here. By no means is it everything, but new light rail system, blue line, orange line, a transit tunnel under downtown that will help make everyone's trip faster, an expanded bus system like the 801 and 803 that currently exists, 4 new Metro Rapid routes, 9 new park and rides, and 11 new pickup zones. And we are also transitioning to a zero emissions fleet, which, as someone kind of mentioned this morning when we were on site, could also mean a more quieter cityscape. You don't have a loud diesel engine, you have a quieter electric vehicle. So really also looking to benefit the community on multiple levels, not just in having cleaner air, but also a quieter city. Next slide. So the value proposition of Project Connect. So the question really is, how many people can we get through an intersection in a minute? As you can see with this animation here, with the light rail, with the transit line, we can get more folks through a light cycle than they would have been able to in a vehicle. On the left, you can see 126 people move through, 80 in transit, but with a dedicated right-of-way, 235 people on a road can come through, and 204 of those people are in transit. Next slide, please. So we want to mention that Project Connect reflects the community's values. We're talking about opportunity and equity. We're going to help create thousands of good local jobs, provide more access to destinations like healthcare, education, employment, job opportunities, entertainment, and essential services. Environment and sustainability. It's a shared passion in our community for the environment, and that's why we're committed to environmental and sustainable practices, and it's core to Project Connect. That includes the previously mentioned zero emissions fleet. And we're leaning into this challenge to conserve and protect natural resources in the decisions we make. And then innovation and technology really driving us forward and inspiring much of what we are doing and who we are as a region. So we're really embracing that spirit, hoping to make transportation smarter, more efficient, enjoyable. Next slide. And so here we see kind of a conceptual of what Project Connect will look like. This isn't necessarily one particular location, but is kind of representative of our aspirations. Just moving the picture left to right, you can see a dedicated bike lane, new sidewalks, new trees, cars sharing the space, high-vis crosswalks, light rail, and the center median, station platforms with shade, and again, the same treatment on the other side, dedicated space for trees, for bicyclists and pedestrians. Next slide. So how will your feedback be incorporated? Right now, we have completed our 15% design, which is publicly available and is posted on our website. We have entered into FTA project development. And so we're having these conversations here and now to get your feedback and to get your input. This is feeding into our draft environmental impact statement and our draft 30% design and cost estimates. In the summer, we're looking to release our 30% design and cost estimates to get further feedback from the community. And that will be the end of the environmental impact statement, 30% design comment phase. And then in the winter of 2022, we're looking for a final environmental impact statement and the FTA NEPA record of decision, or ROD. And that record of decision gives us the green light to go ahead. And that brings us to 2023 and beyond. So what does that all mean? Your feedback will be incorporated into the next step of the project, the draft environmental impact statement, draft 30% design, and cost estimates. Next slide, please. So right here we have a overview of the light rail corridor. Also wanted to note that the gold lines here, that red circle that you see like a bullseye is where we're talking about tonight. Gold line going from Stasny on South Congress north, going under South Congress Auditorium Shores, under Town Lake or LBJ Ladybird Lake, and then going downtown, portaling up, coming above ground, north of MLK, and then proceeding at surface down the drag past Hemphill Park, Hyde Park Triangle, serving all those locations, intersecting with the red line at Crestview, and stay tuned for that coming up soon. We want to talk to the community about that. And then ending at the North Lamar Transit Center. And then the blue line, sharing that route south from North Lamar Transit Center, also serving UT in the drag, but as it goes underground, it will serve downtown and then branch off and then serve the airport and Riverside Drive. Next slide, please. So hot topics, what we've heard, themes of interest, and we're gonna hit on these themes throughout the night. Public safety inclusion, definitely hearing a lot about that. Housing diversity and community integrity, ecological resilience, health and well-being, efficient traffic planning, urban design excellence, consideration of the tunnel versus street level for Guadalupe from 21st to at least 38th Street, and then maintain housing diversity and community integrity, and the greening of the route. We've been hearing a lot from the community on these topics, and we wanted to spend some time tonight addressing some concerns and providing some clarification. So you stay tuned for the rest of the night. You'll be seeing us touching on these topics. Next slide, please. So today's discussion areas, as Lonnie mentioned earlier, we're going to do it in two parts. So I'm going to hand it off to Peter Mullen for part one. Peter?
Got to unmute. Still make mistakes on Zoom after all this time. Nice to see everybody. Thanks for taking your time out of your evening to join us. Really appreciate it always. And if, as Lonnie said, if this is your first time, even better. Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about 29th Street in particular and what's going on there. Some pretty, I think some interesting opportunities and some change to the configuration of that intersection. Go to the next. So just as a reminder, and many of you may have participated in the community design workshop about the drag that we held in the fall. We are currently carrying two options for the drag, and those two options get carried forward sort of all the way up to 29th Street. And so we'll talk about those two options when they get to the Hemphill Park station and 29th Street. Go back one, sorry. Option A is an option where you've got you've got the guideway with the light rail in the middle of the street, and then one lane on either side of that, which could be used for buses or buses and general purpose traffic, and then a shared use path on either side of that. Then go to the next. Option B is the transit mall concept, where all general purpose vehicles would be relocated to other routes around the drag, and then the guideway would be used for light rail and potentially buses as well. And then you have separated facilities for bikes and pedestrians on either side, as well as trees, etc. So those are the two options, and they do move forward to 29th Street. I do want to make a plug for, we are holding another workshop on the drag on Thursday, February 24th. So that's in 2 weeks. So hope that you will all be able to join us for that. Okay, next. So moving north from the drag, we get to the Hemphill Park station, which is between 27th and 29th, and then the intersection with 29th itself. You know, as we go through this, you'll see that there are a number of properties that are and blocks that are impacted by the alignment of the light rail and the reconfiguration of the intersection at 29th Street in Guadalupe. We have notified all property owners of those, but if for any reason we haven't connected with you, if you're a property owner or if you own a business or operate a business in this area, and we haven't made a connection with you, you know, we hope that this is, we want to connect with you. And so part of the purpose of tonight is to make sure that we are, you know, getting the word out and making sure we're making connection with all local stakeholders. So, you know, I think with that, you know, let's dive into this intersection. And I'm going to pass it to Jim Adams from McCann Adams Studio, who's going to walk you through the details. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. This is a picture of what the intersection looks like today. And if you've been here, you know just how difficult this intersection is, really for all modes, whether you're a driver of a car or whether you're on a bicycle or as a pedestrian. It's a pretty daunting place. You can see that there is a huge amount of asphalt. It's a very awkward geometry. If you happen to be at Juiceland and you want to get to Taco Shack, you have to walk across 3 different crosswalks and light signals to make that maneuver. It's very, very awkward. It's also very unattractive. This is what it looks like in plan. And one of the challenges of bringing light rail through this area is that just the angles, the geometries of these 2 grids colliding together make it really difficult for the transit to work. And so if you look at the next slide, which shows option A, as Peter just mentioned, is the one where we have general purpose lanes on either side of the trackway. You'll see that we've had to create a geometry with much smoother and bigger radiuses to make all of this work. But in doing that, it's not just about bringing the rail through this area, it's about creating a safer environment for all of the modes. So whether you're a cyclist, a pedestrian, or riding in a car, the idea is to make this environment a safer, more attractive, and more efficient intersection. So option A, again, is the one with the general purpose traffic lanes on either side of the trackway. If you're heading north on Guadalupe, and you would be just on the east side of the trackway, of the guideway, and you would join Guadalupe at the 30th Street intersection. The traffic, you would have a full movement intersection at 30th Street, also at 29th Street, where there would be a signal. If you're proceeding south on Guadalupe, you would proceed either south along the trackway, south of 29th Street, or directly onto Oasis Street, which would be connected to that intersection. Option B is very similar, but with the transit mall, all of north and south traffic south of 29th Street would be directed onto Oasis Street, which would be 2-way which would operate as two-way south of 29th Street, which is an improvement that the city's corridor project office is planning to implement over the next year. If you're a cyclist on either of these alternatives, the dark red on this diagram shows a protected bikeway. So a cyclist coming through here would have be completely separated from the rail and from vehicles, making it a much safer condition. You also see on this diagram a lot of trees. We have the opportunity of creating a much greener and shadier environment. And the way the transit works through here, we end up with remnants of right-of-way that's no longer needed, and we end up with remnants of properties that will be needed to make this alignment work. So there's a whole question of how those properties might transition in the future and how those could contribute to the public realm. We have identified one area in particular that we think would be ideal for a public open space at the northwest corner of 29th and Guadalupe, which you can see here could be a small park. But the overall goal here is to make sure that the rail is working efficiently, but that at the end of the day, we create a much safer and more attractive environment at the center of this part of town. And this is just showing the existing condition on the top and what it will look like in the future. Again, resolving some of the awkward and unsafe aspects of this intersection. And with that, I pass it over to Jerry, who's going to tell us a little bit about the tunnel considerations.
Hi, everybody. Jerry Smiley. I am the head of the project manager for the Orange Line for the AECOM consulting team. Before we get into the whole tunnel discussion, or at least talking about this particular scenario, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of, when you are designing a system such as this, we only implement tunnels where we absolutely need to, and when it's the only technical option. So, like, for example, the downtown tunnel is there because we have limited block lengths and the stations are longer than the block lengths and we don't want to block cross streets. So, and we're also like crossing under the river because there's no opportunity to come up sooner than where we would like to. So we have to cross under the river. So those are the technical issues, just as an example. So anytime you do have a tunnel, though, one of the objectives is to come back to the surface just as quickly as possible, because it's more cost effective to operate it that way. And so the question is, does extending a tunnel, do the benefits of that, or the perceived benefits of that, are they justifiable, or do they justify additional cost, is what I was trying to say. So let's just play the what if game. And let's say we wanted to extend the tunnel here in scenario one. So down on the bottom left-hand side of that, you see the tunnel portal, which is outlined with the blue dashed lines. That's where we're proposing the existing tunnel portal. And it would rise up out of the ground and be at grade throughout the West Transit Mall. If we did a what if scenario and we said, well, let's see, if we wanted to extend the tunnel, how far would we have to extend the tunnel before we could come out next? Well, the next logical place to daylight would be around the 27th to 29th Street. Now, one of the things that this would do is it would cause then the West Mall station to then be underground. And as a result of that, you have to have things like head houses and ventilation systems. So that would actually cause some additional property impacts in that area if we wanted to have an underground station at West Mall. The other issue of daylighting at the 27th to 29th area is that the station has to be on a flat. It has to be flat. It can't be, on an incline, right? So to make a station in there flat, you're doing it generally where the portal, logical portal wants to go. So it looks very similar to what you see in the bottom right-hand corner there, which is Mockingbird Station in Dallas. It's a depressed station, so it's below grade, but it's flat, right? So once you are at the station, you have to leave the station. That means you have to continue your climb up out of the tunnel and into to get back to street grade. Well, if we extended the tunnel in that particular location, what that would do is it would cause some challenges because obviously we have to close 29th Street to cross traffic. So that's a little bit of a challenge. It's not, scenario one's not really very desirable. So the scenario two, the next logical place would be the portal somewhere in the neighborhood between 30th and 32nd Street. Well, now we have the cost of 2 underground stations. So you would have one at West Mall, but you would also have one at Hemphill Park. So that's additional cost there. And then the portal itself is kind of an issue because on either side of the right-of-way where the portal would be are 2 properties of historical significance that would likely be impacted due to the wider right-of-way in those particular areas. So the last scenario where we look could be to extend it all the way out to 34th Street or just south of 38th Street, so between 34th and 37th. Well, a couple of issues in this scenario as well, because that would require some closure of east-west closure of the 35th Street traffic, plus some additional property impacts, and plus some additional impacts of some pretty significant storm sewer lines in that area that are like 108 inches in diameter. So it's pretty significant. And so you see that extending that tunnel, all that does is just add a lot of additional costs without a lot of benefit in this particular area. And bottom line, it just, when other options are available, you take those other options. You don't build tunnel, you only build tunnel when you just don't have a choice. And an additional 1.7 miles of tunnel would be quite extensive and really not generate the benefits that we would like to see.
Well, thanks, Jerry. I appreciate your help here with this section. I know that several people have already been asking some questions in the Q&A and in the chat. First, I just want to point out, it helps to ask questions in the Q&A so that way everyone can see the question and everyone can see the answer. So if you've been posting it in the chat, go ahead and throw it over to the Q&A so we can go ahead and answer some of those questions. Also, there's lots of ways to participate. We would encourage you to raise your hand and that way we can recognize you in order. But you can also, if you can't find the raise your hand feature, you can use the chat to be recognized so we can ask a question for the whole group. And when you are called on, we will set it up like you would with a council meeting where we can allow you to talk so that you can ask your question live versus typing it. And as we're getting ready for that, I did want to kind of kick off the Q&A discussion here. And again, remember, we're talking about this section, and then we're going to transition over in about 30 minutes over to the northern section of this corridor. But I thought we should probably start with this question that Mark Phillip asked in the Q&A, which is probably for Jerry and the AECOM team. And I would encourage the folks who are part of our team to open up your camera so that way you're not just popping in and popping out. So, Jerry and Jim and Meg and Sophia, Peter, Vikram, that way it'll be an Isis, just to make it a lot easier for us to all communicate. But the first question Mark asked was, could you ballpark what the additional cost would look like for the tunnel options? I know that our slides didn't have that, but they were wondering, how much of an impact is it to have that tunnel extend to 29th or to 31st or to 34th or to 38th Street?
No, I mean, we haven't gone through and costed any of that out because we never determined that it was actually a feasible solution. So we didn't go through the whole process of costing that out, but you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars for extensions. I mean, just the underground stations alone would be significantly higher than an at-grade station, just due to all the firelight safety measures and things of that nature that you have to incorporate.
Thanks. Let's see, we've got, have you estimated travel time differences with the tunnels versus surface?
Again, we did not, because it wasn't one of those things that we felt was feasible or reasonable. Would you gain some travel time through there? Yeah, a little bit. I don't know if it would be significant over the length of the entire 20 miles, but it could be, you could gather some speed up there. Are you gaining enough ridership to justify that? Or I can't say that.
All right, let's see. I do see a hand up. I'm going to allow Patricia Anderson to ask a question. We'll come back to the Q&A in just one sec. Patricia, go ahead. Oh, actually, you have to unmute yourself. All right, we'll come back to you, Patricia. I've set it up so that you can speak, but you have to unmute first. You can do that by going to the bottom of the screen and clicking on what looks like a microphone.
My apologies. I
There
did
you
that
are.
error.
Great, we
I
can
have
hear you.
no question. Thank you.
Go for it. Oh, you just muted yourself again.
No, I actually, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. You're
I actually said that I had not raised my hand. I was not
okay.
aware that you could see me, quite frankly. So I don't have a question. I'm enjoying the discussion. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, let's see. I'm going to take another Q&A question.
Want to start from the top and just see how many we can get through?
Yeah. So do you want to start with, will quiet vehicles pose a threat
Let's ask that.
to the visually challenged who often rely on hearing? How do you address that concern? This is an accessibility question from Kimberly Levinson. Anyone want to take a stab at what happens when we have electric vehicles in this area?
And maybe if we don't have a direct answer, team, because of this particular use case, it might be helpful to just talk a little bit about the vehicle typology high level that will be planned. Maybe Sophia, you can talk to that a bit.
Sure, I can do that. The vehicles right now are under design and being specified. We are working with, manufacturers around the globe on what type of vehicles that we will have for this system, and things like this are definitely under consideration for the specifications and the design criteria for those vehicles.
And I think it's important to note that even though the engines themselves will be more quiet, the vehicles themselves will be more quiet, there's still the friction on the, on the rail, the friction on the road of rubber and road. So they won't be so silent that you won't hear them coming. Just like, I don't have an engine and you can hear me coming down the street too.
Yeah, and Lonnie, I just wanted to add that there will be audible pedestrian signals so that folks will know when it is safe to cross, just like currently in certain locations with the city of Austin, that we make sure that pedestrians who may not be able to see or visually impaired can tell that it's safe to cross at this time, and the signal allows for a crossing. So one of the benefits of this will be, it'll be a little bit more up to date on that level.
Well, let's see, I'm going to change gears altogether. There was there's a smattering of different questions and talking about different businesses. So I think we should just kind of pull back a little bit and talk about what are we doing to talk to the small businesses on that corridor and the property owners on that corridor about right-of-way impacts generally. And you can name specific businesses if you want, but I think it would be easier if we just pull back a little bit, not specifically focus on any one business. Vikram, did you want to get us started with that?
Yeah, happy to. So we've notified every property along the project corridor, actually more than a few times. We're having conversations with property owners and businesses right now. I think my ask would be is that if there is a property or a business owner that you are aware of that you don't think has had a chance to know about the project or talk to us, definitely put them in touch with us and we'd love to talk to them. It is still early in the process where it is 15%. So we are making adjustments to the plans. We're finding out more as we talk to the community. We're talking to our partners at Austin Energy, ATD, TxDOT, you name it. So we're still having conversations and refining our plans, but we'd definitely like to talk to property owners or businesses that you think may not be aware of the project. Definitely put us in touch with them. Overall, speaking about the process itself, the conversations have been really good, I would say, with property owners and businesses. I think everyone's very excited about having light rail come. I think some folks are surprised that, you know, Austin's actually reached this point, which has been an interesting bit of feedback. A lot of people were surprised to hear that the ballot initiative passed and things like that. So I think everyone is overall very excited, but they just want to know more and understand better how this is going to change their city. And that's why we really want to have those conversations about what's going on, what's it mean for you in the short term, long term, things like that.
I think I'm going to switch gears from the Q&A, and I see some very patient hands raised. So Christopher Toth, I'm going to make it so that you can speak. You still have to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, am I coming through?
Yep.
Sweet, yeah. So I was wondering, were there any plans to integrate the station with the actual Hemphill Park there? Because it seems like it's kind of natural, like the station's named after it, and it's one of the bigger kind of public areas that's on the line. I think the next closest thing would probably be like Auditorium Shores. So it seems like a great, like, it makes sense, but I'm not sure if that's really been explored.
Chris, I'm gonna, before our team answers, I'm gonna piggyback with another question that came in that's somewhat related, which is, can we talk about why there's a station at Hemphill Park in the first place? So if the team can take a stab at answering that question in two parts. So both getting at Chris's question about the park and then also location and station reasoning, if you will.
Well, station naming has more to do with the proximity of the street Hemphill Park as opposed to the neighborhood, because we don't want to call it station number 12 because then nobody would know where that is. But Hemphill Park is actually, Hemphill Park and West Mall are two of the highest projected ridership stations on the entire system. This is because of the density that's in West Campus and also partially on the east side there at specifically at Hemphill Park. You have within 1/2 mile of that station, there's a significant amount of walk-up riders. Those riders are going to go through other places throughout the system. So it's absolutely justified. It's a very high ridership on the 801 currently as well too.
Looks like Peter, you're unmuted. Did you want to jump in?
No, I love the question because I think the implicit in that is that we're always trying to locate stations adjacent to other public realm amenities, right? Because these stations become centers of activity, right? There are places to gather, there's places to get information. They tend to anchor neighborhoods. So I think I love the way you're thinking. Unfortunately, because Hemphill Park itself is kind of off alignment, like getting the train there and getting it back into the Guadalupe would probably be a challenge, if not impossible. But I think the idea behind your question is great and certainly consistent with what we're trying to do, frankly, with this intersection. I mean, part of one of the things that we're trying to build into the reconfiguration of the intersection is some public open space, right? That is in proximity to the station itself. So.
And I want to, if I can editorialize just a little bit, I just want to remind people the names on the map are really part of the planning process. The ultimate namings for these stations can still be influenced and impacted. And so if you're part of this working group and you think, no, we really should honor this historic name of person, place, or perhaps there should be some other names considered. We're open to that, and that's part of what the working groups are about. So I would encourage you to consider that and know that Hemphill Park is a working title before the theatrical release. I think there was some questions here about Nueces. Meg, did you want to help lead some of that discussion?
Yeah, it looks like we have a few questions coming in about what are the plans for Nueces. So earlier we talked about how some traffic might be able to flow into Nueces. We have our colleagues from the city of Austin joining us this evening, and they can update us on some of the shorter term plans. So Anna, if you don't mind, just give the group an update on the short term plans for Nueces.
I'm sorry, Meg, I just got kicked out and I came back in. Can you tee that up again for me?
We had a couple of questions come in about the two-way conversion on Nueces. And so we're just going to ask you to give an overview of what the city is planning in the short term on that segment.
Sure. So an improvement that was recommended as part of the Guadalupe Street Corridor Plan from back in 2016 was a conversion of Nueces Street. And we're talking about the segment from 24th Street up to where it meets Guadalupe Street. The nexus for that is that, you know, one-way to two-way conversions usually result in just calmer streets, less traffic, lower speeds, and it really help facilitate whatever option moves forward on the drag. So the first work we're going to be doing is installing a traffic signal at the intersection of where Nueces meets Guadalupe Street. That work will start probably this summer to the fall. And then after that, we'll be doing changing the striping and the signs on Nueces Street north and north to facilitate that two-way conversion.
Thanks, Anna. That's helpful. And while we're on the topic of street configurations, we do have a lot of questions coming in regarding to property impacts, and just I'm going to consolidate a bunch of questions here in curiosity about what other things have we considered to try to prevent some of the property impacts. I know a little bit, the team talked earlier about the geometry of the tracks, but let's talk a little bit about the things both that we've tried and looked at, but also the processes that we're doing to make folks whole from a high level. So Jerry, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the driving force behind why the geometry is the way it is there?
At 29th, particularly? Actually,
yeah, because you know, there's a lot of folks have a lot of questions about Dirty Martin.
Well, I think it's also, it would be helpful.
Jerry, just to also talk about how we approach property impacts, right? I mean, because I think I want to just preface say, you know, we recognize that this program and this introduction of this new transportation infrastructure is going to have impacts, right? And that's going to be hard on some of the properties that are directly impacted. And so, you know, I think our as a program, our goal is to minimize those impacts to the fullest extent possible. I mean, that's how we approach the program. And if there are unavoidable impacts, then, you know, we have to do our best to communicate them as clearly as possible, and then provide support and for those impacted property owners and business owners. So, you know, but I just want to say, I don't think we take that eventuality lightly. Like, we recognize that that's going to be difficult for some, and, you know, part of why we want to get out to the public early and often is to make sure that we can do everything we can to support those business and property owners that are impacted. I don't know, Jerry, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I thought you said that very well. Like you said, we don't take it lightly. You know, we try to avoid property impacts to the greatest extent possible. And we've taken that approach up and down the entire corridor. In fact, you know, we put an emphasis on avoiding residential impacts particularly. And, you know, but there are still a couple of those up and down the corridor that are just unavoidable. In this particular area, our right of way is the tightest throughout than it is throughout the entire corridor. especially between 27th and 29th. You only have about, I think it goes down to public right-of-ways as low as 53 feet. So it's just not enough right-of-way for us to do the things that we want to do. And since we're going to be impacting the properties, and you're already impacting the properties, let's make it what it needs to be. Isis, if I can ask you to answer the question about the geometry there between 27th, 29th up to 30th.
Like Jim showed, the existing conditions are quite sharp. So you have a turn that is very sharp. And so when we were doing our design for the track so that the orange line could run through that intersection, those tracks were just not working. Unfortunately, trains don't turn as fast as cars do, or have the ability of turning as sharp as cars do. So because of that, we needed to flatten out that curve, regardless of what we did south of that or north of there. We just needed to flatten out the curve, and that's why you're seeing that curve moving a little bit to the east, and that's to accommodate the trains to be able to pass through there. And then also in an effort to accommodate the bicycle movements going north and south, there needs to be certain angles so that the wheels don't get trapped in the guideway, and that's for bicycles and for motorcycles and all of that. So in order to achieve all of those things, that's why we have the alignment where we have on 29th Street and the modifications for road and pedestrians and vehicles and track and all of that.
I know that there have been several people in the chat asking, which properties may be impacted. I know that all of these materials, and in fact, every meeting that we've had, the video, the PowerPoint, it all lives on the Project Connect website. You can always go to the Get Involved page, slide down to the bottom, and go to the engagement library, and you'll see all those materials there. This will be showing up there because it is a working group presentation. But I think to put a few different questions together, can anybody address some business access issues? I know that some businesses, they're going to stay there, but because of the new street configuration, it may be difficult to maybe arrive there by a car, or maybe arrive there with an 18-wheeler. Is there any work being done to secure that kind of access to those businesses?
Lonnie, I saw those concerns were around Woodsville area, so I think we can talk about it when we're doing the walkthrough. I'll mention those things.
Sure. So we'll be going through a walkthrough on the corridor in about like 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll get to some of those access for Wheatsville issues at that point. Did anybody else want to cover that, or we'll get to it then? Okay, then I hear was a fun one, so let's just put something fun out there. Scott Morrison asked, I've noticed that none of the renderings are showing overhead wires. So what's that about? Is that just marketing magic, or are we talking about something new?
We are working on figuring out exactly how it's going to look. So you haven't seen it because we haven't completely ironed out all of the details. Still being evaluated.
Yeah,
I think it's worth, I think we can say, right? One of the goals of the program is to use cutting edge technology, right? To the extent which we can. Not bleeding edge, right? We want it to be, proven, but future forward-looking technology. And one of the technologies that's developing for vehicles and is battery technology that can enable you to not have to have continuous overhead catenary wires to power these vehicles. So we're still trying to figure out to what extent we can liberate ourselves from catenary. We don't have the answer to that now. We're exploring those technologies and trying to test out how that would work. But certainly that is a goal, to try to limit the amount of catenary wires that we have throughout the system.
Thanks for that. Let's see, we do have some hands raised, and I'm going to go to Aiden in just 1 second. So I'm going to allow you to talk. Before we get there, I just want to highlight, there's some questions about access for shuttles in the area and buses. There is an entire service planning team that will ensure that the same services that are available remain available in this area. It may be that some of the bus service shifts or it stays on the corridor, depending on if we go with option A or B. And also, I've seen that any of the agreements that are in place, like if UT continues to have it's free to tap and ride, it will include the light rail service as well. So you don't have to worry about that, Tanya. Thanks for asking that question. And then Aiden, I see you are ready to roll. I think we can hear you.
Yes. I think my question is more like, y'all are talking about all the different ways that you can integrate the 29th Street intersection and make all of that make sense. And my question is like, if you aren't going to have like car right of way alongside Guadalupe there at all, then is there any need to connect 29th Street to Guadalupe in the first place? Like, could you just have it end a street earlier or something? Like, is there a need to have that through? Like on the other side, it's not like it crosses over. On the other side, it just ends about a block later. So it seems like you could maybe just shorten 29th Street entirely and simplify the intersection a whole lot.
Yes, I mean, I guess theoretically, yes, we could shorten 29th Street and not take it through because it doesn't go all the way to I-35, for example. But I don't see that helping much. The reason why we need to flatten the curve, it's more the north-south from Guadalupe Street to stay on Guadalupe Street. It's not so much 29th Street intersecting it. So that's why we really haven't explored that option.
Thanks for that. It sounds
I think
like
it's also important to point out that 29th, even though it doesn't go all the way to I-35, it does provide some connectivity to 27th Street. So local circulation is enhanced by having that connection.
Let's see. Let's go ahead to Lyndon Henry, who I see also has his hand up. You'll have to unmute, but I think we'll be able to hear you in just a sec. Lyndon, are you there? You're on mute. All right, Lyndon, while we're waiting.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I clicked unmute the first, just so you know what's happening. I clicked unmute the first time. The prompt disappeared. I tried to speak. It was obvious you couldn't hear me. So the prompt came back and I couldn't get my cursor to move over there to unclick it. So it's kind of clunky. And I'm sorry that we had that technical problem.
We're all longtime listeners, first-time callers tonight. So go for it.
The only thing I wanted to point out, I am a little bit perplexed. I like basically I like the design you've got there for 29th Street. I would say that in the transition from the drag onto continuing on Guadalupe through 29th Street. I mean, it's not horrendous. It looks rather nice with the extra green space and stuff like that. I will say that back in about 2003, when I was Capital Metro, a member of the City and Capital Metro Joint Rapid Transit Project, we were designing that intersection. We did not have to have that much of a tremendous reworking of that intersection. The main reason is that light rail can actually do much tighter curves than you seem to be planning for. And I don't quite understand why you've gone over to basically not allowing for the capability of light rail to basically make a 90-degree curve. It does that in at least two places that come to mind. One is Portland. I can't remember the street names, but I know down in the downtown, it comes off the bridge, comes down and then turns north on a complete right angle turn. And the other place is Sacramento, where it comes into the downtown and makes a right angle turn on one of the major downtown streets. So I know it can be done. So I don't know what kind of vehicle you're thinking of that can't have that capability. So I don't think that technologically we should say that there's a limitation on what light rail could actually do, but in a way you're smoothing out the situation so you have better traffic flow. You're trying to get traffic onto New Oasis. It's going to really have that major advantage, and I think it certainly overall it looks like it's going to improve safety. So I'll end on a happy note.
Did anybody want to address some of the concerns there about the turning radius and safety and the streetscape?
No, I mean, Lyndon, you're exactly right. Could it do a tighter turn? It absolutely could. It also affects operational efficiency to do that. The objective really is the safety issue. It's the safety of all transportation modes throughout that area. It's already a dangerous situation as it is now, and we didn't want to add another element in the middle of that. So creating a safe environment for all modes was the top priority.
Let's see, people keep bringing this up. So, you don't think about elephants. So like the elephant in the room is Dirty Martins. It keeps coming up. I'm wondering if anybody can talk about the outreach that we've been doing and also put in the context of the other historic structures that are in the area. I know Jerry mentioned some. They're in that like 31st Street. Maybe kind of comparing, those two things and why there are historic preservation concerns in one place and a long-time business isn't being considered a historic preservation issue in that area.
Well, I have to state one thing straight up. Just because something is old does not make it historic. We have gone out, we've done some additional surveys. We're working through the Texas Historic Commission as part of the environmental impact statement process to identify resources that are either already on the National Register of Historic Places, eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, on the local, as considered a local historic. And so we're working through all those. So for example, the old fire station there near on the corner, northwest corner of 30th Street, that is a building that's already on the register. That's just an example of those. So our architectural historians have evaluated over almost 1,100 resources up and down this 20-mile corridor to identify which structures are considered historic, and that was not recommended. Dirty Martins was not recommended as historic for a number of different technical reasons.
What were the historic properties that were a little further up on the corridor that were mentioned around 31st Street?
I don't, well, the fire station was one of those, and I don't remember the others off the top of my head, but there's also the wall right there that's adjacent.
Yeah, that's the neighborhood.
That's what I was going to mention, the Aldrich Place Local Historic District. I'm with the City of Austin's Housing and Planning Department, and there's a historic wall that runs kind of the length of those 2 blocks on the east side of the road that's also registered.
Also, I thought I should throw it out there. As a group, the team decided at the beginning that if we were looking at impacts on the corridor, that we were going to give preference to preserving where people live versus businesses. There's several instances where we have chosen for the impact to be on the business side of the street versus the apartments or versus the houses or versus the condos. And so, yes, there are impacts on the west side of the street, but if you were to have the impact on the east side of the street instead, you would be displacing hundreds of people in apartments. You can see that in other parts of the corridor, not just in this section, but also in South Austin on the Orange Line and also in East Austin on the Blue Line. And so there are trade-offs there, but that is part of the thinking and why that you're seeing those impacts on the business side. We're starting
I want to respond. I think there was a thing in the chat about what qualifies as historic. I think that's a really good point. right? I think we have to acknowledge that point. I want to acknowledge that point, right? Is that, we don't just approach these, the urban fabric through, what has a plaque, right? I mean, if things are important to the community, we want to understand that to the fullest extent possible so that we can respect that and appreciate it and work around it. I think Dirty Martin's obviously is one that means a lot to a lot of people. It has for a long period of time. If we could have worked around it, I think we would have for sure. I think there may be some opportunities for Dirty Martin's that, and we've talked with the property owner and the business owner, about what those opportunities might be. And I'm hopeful that, there's a way for Dirty Martin's to be able to be moved to another location if that's the desire on the part of the business. But, I think, I totally agree. It's really, if we could have avoided it, we would have.
Well, I wanted to bring it up, and I know it's a sore subject, but to quote Sarah Silverman, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And we just needed to have a little bit of time to talk about this in public. But since we're talking about impacts and we're talking about what the street will look like, I thought this might be a good time to transition over to actually seeing I don't know, what's the right terminology for this? Is it KMZ file? What are we calling these things today?
In progress, live updated
yes.
in progress.
Yeah, so we're going to transition a little further up the corridor. I just want to ask for the technical folks who are on this meeting, there's still a lot in the Q&A. If you could take some time to put some answers into the Q&A, that would help. We will try to circle back as well, but we're going to move up the corridor to 31st Street and above. And we're actually going to wind up walking and looking at some of the schematics themselves. So there'll be, this is an exciting first peek because we're kind of in between the 15% and 30%. And so you'll see kind of where we are at the moment. It may change a little bit, but where we are with our thinking at the moment. So EC, I think this is your part of the show, right?
I think so.
All right, good.
Okay. So if you can hear me and if you can share my screen, I think you do. Okay, perfect. So what you're seeing right now on the screen is the latest design that we have, the latest thing. It's, as you can see, it's in a weird program, so that's why it looks weird. I want to explain here first what you can see so you orient to yourself and you know what each color represents. To the right of your screen, that's the north. And we are seeing here 30th Street, which we already kind of talked about. In the middle of the road, you are seeing this green shading, and that's representing the area where the orange line is going to be. The red line is the northbound, meaning the train traveling north, and then blue is a train traveling south. Right next to it, with blue lines, you're going to see the traffic lanes. So as you can see here, for example, we have one traffic lane in each side, one traffic lane going north, one traffic lane going south. And then you're going to see signalized intersections with our designated pedestrian crossings. And then in certain areas, I will specify where and where not, you're going to have a designated left turn. And that is important because different to where we have right now, where everybody can turn left whenever they want. Now you can't do that anymore. There's going to be a curb that is, or something, a barrier of some sort that is going to prevent you from doing that. And so as a driver, you're only going to be able to make a left turn where there is a signalized intersection, and that's for safety reasons.
So I know we're at 30th Street and 31st Street, and since we're talking about properties, I think El Patio is over in this area. Can you show where that is? Just on this map? Okay.
Yes, so Patio is right here and Woodsville is right here. So I think that'll give people some reference.
There were no business labels. It's a lot easier that way, knowing where those things are. Great.
I can turn the labels on if you want me to do that. Yes, give me 1 second.
I will say, as an aside, speaking as somebody with color blindness, I can actually see this, and I thank you very much for the color selection you chose here.
And I'll also, just as Isis is going through this, we would have loved to have been in person with everybody tonight, but this is the next best thing. These are draft drawings, and that's why you see the draft watermark. But if you have any questions, please, know that we will have time at the end to discuss this segment.
Okay, so this is not the names of the businesses. This is the name of the owners. That's what we have right now. That's what you're saying. So if it's not helpful, I'll turn it off. It might be blocking more than helping.
Yeah, I think it's more, I don't know if other people think it's a lot of.
Yeah, I feel the same way. We'll just make sure to point out businesses as we're moving, but it looks like El Patio and Wheatsville is there, and that line's getting real close to Wheatsville.
Yes. So let me go into a little bit more detail on what you're saying so that we can talk about certain impacts that we're seeing. The gray shading is representing, in other areas, is representing sidewalk and or bicycle facilities. At this location, we are showing a shared use path. And I saw that comment in the questions, in some questions. We're showing shared use path because, as you all know, it is very constrained around here. And so when possible, we are reducing the sidewalk and bicycle facility, like bicycle lane, to a shared use path in order to reduce the building impacts. And so whenever we reduce that and we see that that means that we're no longer impacting a building, then we go ahead and do it. If it doesn't really result in reduction of a building impact, then we go ahead and show the ideal cross-section where we have a separate bicycle and separate papedestrian facility. So that's why you're seeing the shared use path.
Because I think to the south, you see the separated. That's perfect. I think that's good.
So right here, you can see separated, and then just north of 30, we're reducing it to minimize property impacts. And then the blue line is a proposed right-of-way, and the white line is representing the existing right-of-way. So that's going to give you an idea of where we are showing impacts and where we're not. And then just throughout, you're going to see blue boxes, and that's representing a bus stop. And I do want to clarify, this design is in the works, so things are changing. So just keep that in mind.
And
so as we just
those shared use paths are, I know it's really constrained, so we're trying to reduce impact, but do you know how wide it is?
It's about 9 feet.
Great.
It varies, but the minimum is going to be 9 feet. So let's talk about this location, for example. In this location, we have residences on the left side, and so that's why we are trying to reduce as much as possible. We have Wheatsville right here, and then at this location, you're seeing a pedestrian crossing. This is a signalized pedestrian crossing, but it's only we're only showing it to be as a proposed pedestrian crossing, not vehicles to turn here. So this is there's already an existing flashing beacon. So we are maintaining that. If you are a car and you're trying to access Wheatsville and you're coming from the north, you're gonna have to go to 30th Street, do a U-turn, and that's how you're gonna be able to access their parking. If you're coming out and you wanna go south, then you are going to take a right and go to the next signalized intersection, which is at 34th Street. In there, you do a U-turn and go back south. As far as access from delivery trucks to Wheatsville, that's still in the process of being figured out. We are coordinating with Wheatsville and trying to figure out how to best accommodate that. As I continue to move forward more or towards the north, you have the neighborhood right here, that has the historic wall that we talked about earlier today. And so we are staying within existing right-of-way at this location. We're not showing any impacts to that wall. On the west side, we're also staying within existing right-of-way. We're not showing impacts. We are showing impacts where we have the bus stop, and that's because we just have to provide space for that. And then as we continue to move north, we go to 34th, which is, like I said before, it's a signalized intersection with a dedicated left turn, and you will be able to take U-turns here as well. We are unfortunately shifting a little bit to the west of this location, and you are seeing some impacts to the right-of-way at this location. So that's represented by the blue lines. We are not showing any building impacts for this segment between 32nd and 34th. The reason why we are showing some shift around here is you'll see over here. So let me zoom out. So this is 34th Street, 38th Street is here on the right of your screen, and you have a station right here. This platform is going to serve the trains going south. So if you're traveling south in your train, this is where the train is going to stop. And so in order to accommodate that while avoiding impacts to the west that have some historic value, or they're either historic or they are, Jerry, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna ask you for help with this word that it just flew in my head.
Eligible.
Eligible, there you go.
Potentially eligible.
To be historic, here, this vehicle, no, it's right here. The mechanic shop right here.
Flamingo.
It's late and my language is going away.
Flamingo.
Yeah, flamingos. And so that's why we're shifting to the east around here. And then also we're shifting to the east because I know that this talk is only covering to 38th Street, but north of 38th Street on the west corner, we have some big structures for drainage that we're also trying to avoid, some big utilities that we'll talk in whenever we talked about, we talked to you all about this section, but because of all of this, we are shifting to the east around here. And so that's why you're seeing this property impact on the east side. Unfortunately, at this location, we do have some building impacts. You might ask, if we shift this bus stop, would it save that building impact? We check that, but it doesn't, just removing the bus stop doesn't really help the building impact. So that's why we're placing it there. And then this building impact is also, we couldn't avoid it. So that's why you're seeing it there. If you're traveling northbound, you get to 38th Street, do a U-turn, and then you can access all of these businesses on the left or on the west. Otherwise, if you're traveling out of any of these businesses and are trying to go north, you travel to 34th Street, do a U-turn, and you can go north. You are seeing also a bus stop here on 34th Street. These two bus stops do have a pull out for the buses to not block traffic, as you can see here. And I think, anything else, Lonnie, you want me to cover?
Well, so there was some question about why the Hyde Park station is south of 38th Street. And I know that we're not going so far up the corridor tonight, but I thought it would be worthwhile to point out that we're at a split platform there and what that looks like, because I think we only talked about southbound, like nobody's going north in Hyde Park.
Yes, you're correct. So if you're traveling southbound, the train stops south of 38, but if you're going northbound, the train will stop north of 38. So yes, it's a split platform and it's hugging 38th Street, let's say.
And why do you go split versus a center platform in this location?
So when we have an intersection like this, we go split because, as you can see, you have the train in the middle. In a normal intersection, when you don't have a train, you normally align the left turns, and so they disappear. When you have the train, you can't align the left turns, and so you're already going to have this space here where nobody can use for some distance, and then we're going to transition back to the middle, right? And so because you already have that space, might as well use it and have the station there so that we minimize right-of-way impacts. If we were to have a center platform, then wherever we have that platform is just going to be wider.
Much wider impact. Thanks for that. And then there were some questions about U-turns being realistic. Are these U-turns just make a U-turn, or like how are we making sure that people can actually make a U-turn?
This is all in the process of being evaluated on adjusting the design to see if we need to make any adjustments.
Yeah, but it's
And
also
I'm assuming there'll be lights involved, right?
Signalized is what he's going for. He says,
oh, okay.
It's a signalized. So the U-turns would be signalized. They'd be protected.
Thanks for that. All right, so I see we've had a little bit of time to digest this new information, which again is a little different than what we saw during 15% and is still written in clay. We are still making changes. I know that there are some questions in the Q&A, and Meg may be taking a look at those. But I noticed that there's some questions, some people who have their hands up, and I wanted to honor that as well. Again, remember, we're in the 31st through 38th section. So, you know, Betsy, I'm going to call on you to speak. But if your question is about that lower section, we need to save time here, and then we can come back to that. Betsy, did you want to unmute?
I didn't have a question.
Ah, well, your hand was up, so I called on you. But hi, thanks for being here tonight. How about Ava McDaniel? I see your hand is up. Would you like to speak? Well, I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. If that continues, you might want to, you could send me a chat and I can read your question on the air if you like. So that way we can answer that.
We do have a question, Lonnie and team, about similar how we covered the consideration of underground. Do we consider elevated in this segment?
Ah, yeah, that's a really great idea. So I know a lot has been talked about tunneling. What about going up in the air?
Isis, can you maybe zoom out a little bit so we can see the section as a whole, maybe from like 38th down to 31st? I think just to give people context, that'd be great. Thanks.
So we did consider that early on during the, as we were developing the locally preferred alternative, but that was dismissed very early because aerial tends to be a little bit more obtrusive from a visual perspective, but it's also due to the proximity of the neighborhood, particularly Hyde Park neighborhood there, it would receive a significant amount more noise. So it's more of a noise issue than anything. And everybody seems to think it's like, well, if it's aerial, you're avoiding all these various conflicts. Well, those bridge piers still have to go deep into the ground. There are still utilities that have to be moved regardless. So, you know, the only thing you get to do is maybe it saves a little bit of your traffic or your traffic lane widths and stuff like that. But, we dismissed.
And Jerry, isn't it a little bit like your comment about the tunnel? Basically,
sure.
You know, our goal is to try to fit this into the neighborhood context, right? The introduction of an elevated structure, you know, I think would have a different, you know, would change the sort of the fabric of the neighborhood a lot more than running the trains at grade. And so, you know, I think that that's sort of why one of the reasons why we went in this direction.
Right, those transition areas to ramp up or ramp back down from an aerial structure are very long, and they would definitely be closing cross streets as a result.
And the stations themselves have more stuff, right? Because you've got to have elevators and escalators and you know, and their accessibility issues, you know, with that. So I think that's, you know, in general, we prefer to run at street level, you know, whenever possible.
Let's see, I had a question that was related to right on red, and it seemed like Anna Martin might be able to address that from the city. So here it is. It was, Anna, are you there? First, I should double check that.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Here you are. Now I can see you. And so will we be able to do a right on red on Guadalupe? Karen says it seems risky with all this U-turning going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question. I'll say we haven't got till yet. But if we do expect a lot of U-turn traffic, that's probably something we would look at. Again, we want those U-turns to be able to be made safely.
Thanks for your help there. Let's see, Ava McDaniel, I see your hand is up. I'm allowing you to talk. Can you unmute?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let's do it.
Okay, so there's a bus stop in front of my building at 30th and Guadalupe where Supercuts is located. The building south of me, which is Bickles, we have a shared party wall. So is that going to impact, are you going to have to tear my building down? That's all I want to know.
No, as you can see, we are not touching the building. I can see how the blue line looks like it's very close to the building. We are verifying, and the reason why I'm telling you yes or no, it's because I'm checking the topographic data that we have, and we are not touching the building. And then you also have to keep in mind that we are showing some setback between the edge of the sidewalk and the building. And so there's more feet there than what it's easily seen. So no.
Okay, good. All right, I'll quit sweating bullets now. Thank you.
I'm glad I could help.
Okay, Lonnie, I think Lonnie is muted, but I think there we go.
Yeah, you're right, I muted. Let's see, there was a question. Oh, actually, it looks like Jerry already answered it in the chat.
I don't understand Mr. Toth's question.
Oh yeah, which one is that? Well, I know that he was here before. We could always let him ask it live. Is the
I think
path?
it's asking about the width of the shared use path. The neighborhood, and I'll tell you right now. Yes, we're showing it to be around 10 feet.
Okay, let's, oh. Where'd you go? He was here a minute ago. I guess he put his hand down. I guess it's
Then
also...
I will answer that.
All right, well, here he is again. Let's see if we need to get, Chris, you're on the line.
Yep, no, it was just about, I walk that regularly and it's already pretty tight as it is on the sidewalk. So it's awesome to hear that it's going to be expanded. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's really a challenge in a lot of places where we have, the existing sidewalks. We want to make the greatest amount of improvements, but there's trade-offs. There's just only so much right of way. And unless you want to actually start literally taking a full row of properties on one side or the other of Guadalupe, we can't fit everything in to make everybody, perfectly happy. I think that's always the challenge, right? It's about the trade-offs.
So let's see, I've got a fun question coming from Anna Aguirre, but before I get there, I just wanted to pose a question to this group before, because we're getting close to time, and I'd love it if you would use the chat for this one. We want to return to in-person working groups for sure. It's a lot easier when we can see your face. And so in order to do that, we need to meet somewhere. And you know this part of town better than anybody. Are there any places that you feel safe to meet if we were going to do that in the next few months in person? Where would you want us to meet? If you can just brainstorm with us by putting a few of those places in the chat, we will take those into consideration and bring it back to you as a survey. So that way we can actually start meeting in person rather than always on Zoom all the time. But as promised, I wanted to bring up Anna Aguirre's question. And I'm not sure if this is for the planning team or for ATD folks, but she was asking, is anyone comparing what the current walkability scores are versus what they will be in the future? And not just in this area, just like on the whole line, like how are we considering walkability in context of this project? Anyone want to take a
Well, I was just going to ask our city partners, they do a lot of baselining and data collection. So maybe not specifically with walk score, but Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about how you all are assessing baseline conditions versus future, just generally speaking?
Sure, Meg. Let's see. Many of you know that we have a master plan for building out our bikeways network and our sidewalk network. That plan is being updated right now. We prioritize those investments around things like transit stops and schools and community centers, et cetera. So it's a really good time right now for an update so that we can guide our investments over the next, 8 to 10 years. So we'll be looking closely at the station locations and making sure that there's accessible neighbors and others to access those stations. So I think much more to come, but we're working in partnership with the Project Connect team.
Thank you, Anna. And I love that idea. I know that there are realtors in town who post walkability scores, so it'll be cool to see those evolve. I'm gonna go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Meg.
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna put up our next steps slide so we can take a look at what's coming up in terms of engagement for this area.
Thanks.
All right.
Well, in the meantime, I just want to applaud everybody for putting so many good ideas in the chat. I know that people have various sensitivities about whether we're in person, outside, or inside. So we'll come back and crowdsource it. And I just want to address, one thing that came up there as well. We recognize that for many people, the virtual is the more convenient option. So, we imagine a future where we have in-person and we have virtual events, but we want to make sure that people feel safe and welcomed and able to speak, and not everybody does using this platform. Take it away, Meg.
All right. So Bikram, our Orange Line outreach, will tell us a little bit about what's on the docket coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. So really quick, thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to have a drag community design workshop on Thursday, February 24th. That will be virtual as well. Looking to get more interest from the students, get some more input there. It will be basically the same materials as the December design workshop, but everyone here is welcome to join us. And then we're going to have spring meeting series to discuss different themes. Those are not going to be geographic specific, so you can mix it up with your neighbors in South Congress or neighbors on Riverside about themes such as environment, traffic, connectivity. And those will be on March 29th and March 31st. Please go to our Get Involved page as well. We have some more working group meetings planned for different parts of Austin, but please do join us at the drag working group, the design workshop, sorry. And then, yeah, that's along to all of it.
Well, terrific. You know what? We pride ourselves on trying to end these things on time. So thank you so much for extending your workday. Maybe you're having dinner, maybe you're with your family, but we're glad that you spend some time with us. We're looking forward to seeing you in the future. And again, we hope you'll go to projectconnect.com/get involved and sign up for more of these workshops. We'll see you then.